We have a special guest alert today. We are bringing on Warren Sharp to talk about why he believes in Jim Harbaugh's vision and how important it'll be for Justin Herbert to be better late in games.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, and I'll be joined, as always, by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, especially so you don't miss big guests like the one on today's show, bringing on Warren Sharp, one of the best NFL analysts in the business, to bring on his 2025 NFL preview, which he has a special offer for our listeners, and it is super in-depth, especially about the Chargers. But today we're going to talk about why he believes in this team under Jim Harbaugh and why they could be better this year, but also why they need Justin Herbert to be better late in games, because he has the numbers to say, hey, he could do a little bit better, but we all know it has to do with the supporting cast, and Sharp is bullish on the young guys the Chargers have coming up, and is actually a fan of Greg Roman's passing attack, and he will tell you why. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Here he is, Warren Sharp. All right, guys, well, we have a very, very special guest on today's show. We have the one and only Warren Sharp, who's on the show today because he just came out with the Sharp Football Analysis 2025 football preview, the most comprehensive NFL book packet of information that I have ever gone through. Super happy to have him on the show today so we could get access to it because we got so much good information from it already. But you guys can find him on Twitter at Sharp Football, where you can also find the link to the book. He's the author of the Sharp Football Analysis 2025 football preview. Warren, thank you so much for coming on today, man. Super happy to get you on the show.
Absolutely. Very happy once this book is done. This is what it looks like in the physical form. This is what 580 pages looks like. It's more than a coffee table book. You might break your coffee table if you drop this too hard on it, but you can get it up on Amazon. There are copies just like this up on Amazon. However, obviously to print this kind of book, it costs a little bit more money. I'm giving your listeners the chance to get the full 586 pages in PDF for just $1 using the code CHARGERS, $1. If you go to sharp.football, it will redirect you to the page that you can check out on the website. This book right now is $35 on my website, but I'm dropping the price down to $1 with the code CHARGERS. So you guys go have at it if you're listening. I promise you won't get a better bang for your buck in terms of getting prepared for the season than what you'll get out of this book. And it's good for, if you're into sports betting, if you're into fantasy football, if you just want to learn more about the Chargers, if you just want to learn more about the other teams that you're going to play on your schedule this year or the other 31 teams in the NFL, there's a lot of good information in here.
Yeah, lots of fantasy stuff too. If you're wondering where you can pick your Chargers favorites, that won't make you a homer. Good for that as well. But also 15 pages of those 500 plus pages specifically dedicated to the Chargers, and a ton of really good in-depth analysis on the Chargers specifically and what you can expect from their rookies, how they might have gotten a little bit lucky last year in certain regards. And that's what we're having him on here for today, to get into a lot of that. But it starts with Jim Harbaugh with this team, especially after you take a 5-win team, turn it into an 11-win team in one season. And in the football preview, you were pretty complimentary of the job that Jim Harbaugh did and ranked him as the 9th best head coach when going through those rankings. So let's just start off with how impressed you were with the job he did in 2024. And do you think the Chargers kind of finally have a coach that has them going in the right direction?
Absolutely. It's a great feeling, obviously, for you guys of the Chargers. You have a foundational coach and a foundational quarterback, and hopefully they can make some sweet music together for several years to come and move further and further into the postseason and ultimately win a Super Bowl. That's the goal. The thing about the Chargers, though, as I was writing the chapter, looking back on 2024, I was very optimistic about the 2024 Chargers prior to the season, and that's because of Jim Harbaugh and what he has done historically. He has been able to turn around franchises very quickly and exceed expectations very quickly in terms of exceeding win totals. And so I expect a high floor for the LA Chargers this upcoming season because they have those adults in the room. They have a good system. They have the discipline, the motivation, the right amounts of all that Harbaugh has learned in part from his dad, in part from his years of playing and years of coaching that helps make the Chargers the team that they are right now.
Yeah, in the book, you were very adamant that Justin Herbert had to play better later in games. Per the football preview, the fourth quarter of one-score games last year, Justin Herbert ranked 25th in accuracy and 23rd in success rate. If the Chargers want to take that next step in 2025, it is important that Justin Herbert finds a way to elevate his game later in games. Would you say that would be accurate?
Yeah, this was one thing that I was surprised by, and I don't know if you guys, as obviously hardcore fans, or the audience is probably hardcore fans, are aware of, but in the fourth quarter of games, Justin Herbert has struggled. Now, you guys went 0-2 in games decided by a field goal last year, 0-5 in 2023. So you've struggled from a win-loss perspective. You're 6-13 under Justin Herbert as your quarterback, which is the second worst mark in the NFL over the last 4 years in games decided by a field goal. And so you could say, well, that's quarterback wins. Who cares about quarterback wins? That's not really a stat. But what drives wins when a quarterback is playing is what his performance is. So let's look at his performance metrics in the fourth quarter of these close games. And you already mentioned some of them, but in one-score games in the fourth quarter, I don't think a lot of you fans out there probably are aware that Justin Herbert, out of 35 qualifying quarterbacks with 100+ attempts in this time period, the last 4 years, Justin Herbert ranks 25th out of 35 in accuracy. You just mentioned 23rd in success rate, 20th in yards per attempt, 11th in EPA, 20th in interception rate, and 28th in sacks taken per pressure. So he struggled. And even if you just want to say, forget before Jim Harbaugh, let's focus on Harbaugh with Greg Roman. He struggled a lot last year in these close game situations, 25th in accuracy, 25th in success rate, among other statistics. So, I think it's fair to be critical about your quarterback when you need to. I know fans tend to defend to the death because other 31 fan bases are throwing barbs and attacking you left and right. So you end up getting so defensive about everything and defending things that probably do need a little bit of work. And so whether that's something Greg Roman does differently, the way that he calls plays, or the way that Justin Herbert just executes, something does need to change because they're struggling to win these close games. And one of the things I always go back to is if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs in one-score games in the playoffs, they are 9-1 under Patrick Mahomes. Ultimately, that is what has won them Super Bowls. And if you can't win one-score games in the postseason, you're not going to win Super Bowls. And the way that you're going to be good at winning one-score games in the postseason is by getting good at winning one-score games in the regular season. And we know the Chiefs went 11-0 in one-score games last year. Maybe you don't want to play a lot of one-score games. Like, you don't want to be the Chiefs. You don't want to get forced into 11 one-score games. You want to win every game by 14+ points. But when you do get faced with those difficult games, you got to figure out a way to win them. The Baltimore Ravens have struggled with Lamar Jackson in those situations, and you guys with Justin Herbert have struggled as well, and needs to be fixed, especially if you're going to try to get through and past that mountain that is Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, who are elite winning those one-score games.
Yeah, that is the cream of the crop. That is the gold standard of that. And I think the hardest thing with Justin Herbert, obviously, even in the Jim Harbaugh era before, there were some coaching deficiencies to say the least. But I think the hard thing with them is, you know, in your preview last year, you had him having the 31st ranked running backs, or the 31st ranked receiving core and the 28th ranked running backs, right? So he didn't have a good supporting cast around them. This year, they're ranked higher, but they're still not ranked in the top 15 of running backs or receivers. So, like, when you're getting into the Justin Herbert conversation and you're fighting these battles, and obviously we've been on the end of those, and even in a small sample size in the playoffs, obviously, defense, running game, all of those things have come back to bite them, right? His defenses, even if you take away the pick six last year, have given up 28 points per game, and they've run for 100 total yards in 2 games on 38 carries and a 2.6 yards per clip, you know, rate. So, like, it is hard to kind of parse these things, but at the end of the day, he does have to be better. The great quarterbacks are judged not only by what they do in the playoffs, and Justin Herbert, to get the monkey off his back, has to win a playoff game. That's the hardest thing about this season, is he can't rectify anything in the regular season. He has to beat playoff teams. But the bigger problem was him not being able to win against good teams, which you also have a good in-depth part of that. But how hard is it to kind of parse, okay, this guy is failing in these moments, but then you look at kind of what's around him, and it's hard to fully blame him because of the lack of weapons, lack of supporting cast he has around him. We have more with Warren Sharp coming up right after this, including why he needs more from his supporting cast to get better late in games and why Warren thinks the young guys they have coming are going to help a lot, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And I know I need a 5-Hour Energy shot every single time I go golfing. But now, golf is all about the good times with good people, of course, but also the good flavors. The grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without having to chase down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. When you look at Justin Herbert or any quarterback, they are judged by how they perform and how many games they win, and do they win in the postseason. And I've hated that for so long. I've hated the fact that we take elite quarterbacks and just pick them apart left and right and criticize like the smallest, errors of the game, or they can't win this particular moment. And we in turn sort of ignore the bigger picture of how great some of these quarterbacks are. And that becomes frustrating to me. And it's not just Justin Herbert. It's quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, who he can't win the big game. It's a competitor, another competitor of yours, Josh Allen, and some of his struggles, which I think his ceiling is also limited, but by his defense. And then you look at other quarterback like Joe Burrow, who's dealing with a terrible offensive line and a terrible defense. So Joe Burrow has the receivers. Justin Herbert's going to work around in 2025. He's going to work around lack of a run game. Now, we obviously hope that Amari Hampton outperforms expectations and goes very far for the Chargers, and they can have that reliability. But when you're with a Greg Roman offense, I think some people just assume Greg Roman's going to come in here and run the ball a ton. Greg Roman actually passed the ball a fair amount on early downs last year, set up some things using the run game. But the problem was that run game was so inefficient and ineffective that it put the Chargers behind the sticks far too often and made Justin Herbert make miracles, which is something that he was doing a lot of pre-Jim Harbaugh, and then he was having to do that some still last year. And so you've got to figure out a way this upcoming season to get more efficiency and dependability out of that running game on those early down situations. Last year, the run game lacked in explosiveness. It ranked 30th in runs of 5+ yards. It lacked in terms of not getting stuffed. They ranked 28th in stuff rate. So they weren't getting the home runs. They were getting stuffed far too often. And their early down runs last season were bottom 5 in the NFL in terms of efficiency and success, which is, if you're going to be balanced and you're going to try to hand the ball off at times, you've got to at least try to keep up with the sticks so that you don't force things to become too difficult for your quarterback. And that's something that the Chargers were not doing. So hopefully, I have more confidence in the receiving core in 2025 than I did in 2024, but it's still not an elite core. The run game is definitely a question mark, and the timing of these runs and how Greg Roman calls these runs is going to be a big question mark for me as well. But at the end of the day, it's still going to come down to Justin Herbert executing. For right or wrong, he's going to get blamed for this, and I think it's more wrong than right, but he does have to figure out a way to get this team to win games and overcome whatever's happening. I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but I wrote about it in the book on the defensive side of the ball, how your defense performed excellent against all these crappy backup quarterbacks and reserves and guys that ended up getting benched last year. And 12 out of your 17 games, you were playing quarterbacks who were backups or who were getting benched ultimately in the season, or who
rookies.
Were outright rookies. Exactly. And so those situations, your defense played like the number one pass defense. But in every single other game that you played a actual real quarterback, which you're going to play a lot more of those real quarterbacks this year, barring injury, your defense played pretty poorly. You ranked and allowed, 7.4 yards per attempt, 12 to 3 touchdown to interception ratio, plus 0.13 EPA per attempt. That's the 31st ranked EPA in the NFL against the 6 quarterbacks that you played that were respectable. We're talking Kyler Murray. We're talking about Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Patrick Mahomes. Now, some of those quarterbacks are a couple of the best in the NFL. Every defense is going to struggle a little bit more against those types of quarterbacks. We're also throwing in Baker and Kyler, though, and you're going to play better quarterbacks this year than you did last year. So it's something your defense has to step up. But offensively, Joe, you need to get a little bit of support there from Justin Herbert stepping up his game as well, so that if your defense allows a little bit more points, it's not the end of the world because your offense is able to match wits with those guys, so to speak.
Yeah, speaking of getting Justin Herbert a little bit more help, it was apparent outside of Ladd McConkey in that playoff game that they were completely kind of outmatched from the skill position player perspective. And so that's why the Chargers went ahead and took weapons with 4 of their first 6 picks in the draft. Now with Mike Williams retiring, how important will it be for one of these rookies like Trey Harris or Keandre Lambert-Smith to have a bigger role in the offense this year?
Very, very important. A quarterback's not going to be able to do everything, and you do have a lot of young players who need to contribute, and they're going to need to contribute quickly. Fortunately, the way that Greg Roman's offense operates, for right or for wrong, he never really puts too much on one particular skill player, right? He definitely tends to balance the load a fair amount there. So you can get that dependability from obviously a rookie last year who contributed a ton, and then have these other guys be more auxiliary pieces, but they simply have to step up when they're called upon. When their number is called, they have to come out there and execute. You don't have to necessarily always produce the splash or the wow plays, but you can't afford those mistakes that end up costing a team to punt the football or costing the team points. You just got to try to, it sounds dumb and simple, but Bill Belichick, do your job. Just go out there. You don't have to make a splash play, but just have a higher floor. And I think that they are capable of doing that, because I really don't think Greg Roman is going to ask them to do something crazy or beyond what they're capable of doing. So the bottom line, though, is I think that you guys are going to be in a good position with the skill players that you have. The thing that surprised me a little bit more was when I posted the offensive line rankings. I'm interested to hear your guys' take. I've shared the offensive line rankings on social, and a lot of the Chargers fans were coming in questioning that we have the offensive line ranked 6th best in the NFL. And I don't really see that very often. So it definitely was something I was filing away for later, is some of these fans were thinking that 6 is a little bit too high for the Chargers offensive line. So I'm going to ask you guys, do you agree or disagree with that ranking, and kind of where do you view the Chargers offensive line amongst the rest of the NFL?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something we were going to talk about, so we can get to it now. And I wonder how much of the rankings kind of skew towards the tackles, right? Because if you're talking about the tackles arguably are the most, they're the highest paid position, arguably the most important position, and they have 2 of those, right? They have 2 of those playing at a very high level. But the Chargers' interior last year was just abysmal. I mean, in that playoff game, I think every one of their linemen allowed at least 3 pressures. But the combination of Bradley Bozeman next to former first-round pick Zion Johnson was just really, really poor. And I think that is kind of where the frustration comes in for Chargers fans, because I don't think there's a single Chargers fan right now that would tell you they think of themselves of having a top 10 offensive line. So I think when you're talking about the pressure, the inability to kind of get push in the running game, and you brought it up in your football preview as far as the yards before contact last year was pretty abysmal. So if you can't pass protect, if you're not getting the push to kind of elevate your running backs, it's hard to think of them as the 6th best overall offensive line if the interior has so many questions. So Trey Pipkins being replaced by Mekhi Becton, that should be a massive upgrade. I mean, just having Joe Alt and Mekhi Becton next to each other feels like it gives you just a chess piece in the running game that you just don't see often, with 2 dudes of just that sheer size being next to each other. But right now they're trying Zion Johnson at center. They're playing him in the Hall of Fame game, or will have played them in the Hall of Fame game. This is releasing Monday, and he'll play on Thursday, and we'll see how that goes. That could be the end of the experiment. But they basically tried to run it back with the same 2 guys, Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson, 2 of the biggest problems on the offensive line last year. but potentially switching their positions to one. In Bradley Bozeman's case, he hasn't played that position since 2020, being left guard. And in Zion Johnson's case, he's never played center. So I think that is where kind of the sore spot comes in for Chargers fans looking at this offensive line, because there are a lot of question marks. And yeah, it could click for Zion Johnson, a former first-round pick. He definitely has the talent. It could be better for Bradley Bozeman in year 2 under Greg Roman, even though he's been in the Greg Roman system before. But I think it's the interior where a lot of fans would take issue with that.
And that's fair, and that's a great explanation for it. Let's see how that experiment goes with Zion Johnson at center and how they try to move pieces around and if that improves at all. The scary part, I will tell you, is last year your team played the 25th hardest schedule of opposing pass rushes. So I have metrics in the book that looks at strength of opponent last year versus this year. This year, I have you slated to play the 10th toughest schedule of opposing pass rushes. So moving from 25th to 10th, it's a big leap. It's one of the bigger ones in the NFL. I have your overall passing offense having played the 18th toughest schedule last year, playing the number 1 toughest schedule this upcoming season. So it might be more difficult for your offensive line to pass protect and for Justin Herbert to have efficiency throwing the football after playing, an average to below average schedule of last year of pass defenses and pass rushes. Now you're going to be playing a top 10 schedule this year.
We still have more with Warren Sharp coming up after this, including why he is the guy that actually believes that Greg Roman's passing attack is helping Justin Herbert, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. And with the money that you save on the tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. And for me, I know I was last minute trying to get my dad a 60th birthday present, something that involved the entire family. And I thought, oh my God, the Padres tickets, I need them. And I'm only going to go to Gametime, where I can obviously see the only price that I'm going to pay without having to worry about the added fees, and also know exactly the view from the seats I'm going to have. And it was such a great experience. And you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Yeah.
What really kind of stood out to me reading the book was that you were very complimentary of the passing game under Greg Roman and what it did to help Justin Herbert, especially using a ton of play action and being aggressive on early downs. Do you think we could see an even better passing attack in year 2 of Roman's system?
I do. I think I like the way that they balance and incorporate play action. I like the way that they challenge vertically, which they were doing at times as well. No quarterback threw more play action passes on early downs in the first half than did Justin Herbert last year. And he averaged 7.7 air yards per attempt, with 33% of his first half early down passes being thrown 10 plus yards, which was 10th most in the NFL. One of the things that teams struggle with in 2024, 2025, I'm expecting the same thing to happen, is explosives. It's hard to generate explosives with the way defenses are playing with 2-eye shells. You need to matriculate the ball with more plays per drive to get it closer to the end zone, to score touchdowns. Fewer touchdowns are being scored from outside of the red zone. It's just harder to come by these explosive plays. You guys have a quarterback with an arm and arm talent who could generate those explosive plays. And you've got a play caller who's willing to set up those explosive plays using run plays and play action. And so now you just got to connect on some of these and hit on some of them. But I like the opportunity that exists within this offense and the structure from Greg Roman to be able to provide some of those explosives to this team. We know Justin Herbert has dealt with some receivers. Actually, Josh Palmer had some last year. Quentin Johnson, we know, has struggled in the same regard with dropping the football and not bringing in some of these passes. You guys got to step it up this year. But because you have an offense that's going to generate those one-on-one opportunities for some of those receivers, and you got a quarterback who's got the arm strength and arm talent to deliver an accurate ball down the field, and you got an offensive coordinator who's going to call these types of plays. Unlike some other coordinators, they threw the number 1 highest rate of play action passes last year. everything is there on the table for you guys to have success generating more of these explosive this upcoming season. The receivers just need to come down with them. Now, there's an aspect of it that your O-line has to pass protect. Play action pass is going to take a little bit longer. Quarterback's going to be turning his eyes on the defense. He's going to have to figure out a way to get his eyes circled back and avoid pressure, slide in the pocket. And that becomes a challenge, especially if you don't have a lot of confidence in that interior offensive line, which is what you guys were talking about. So there are things that you can do to alleviate some of those concerns. Pre-snap, you can allow Justin Herbert more control of line of scrimmage to audible, get better protections, get in better play calls that are going to be set up to help the offensive line deal with the pass rush that might be coming. There's ways to roll them out a little bit more and try to help with running backs up in the interior and allow those packages so that the pressure on the exterior of the lines where you have those strong tackles, maybe Herbert's rolling out a little bit and he has a little bit more time to do that thanks to the strong tackles that you have. So there's things that you can do to offset that. But I absolutely do believe that in year two, I feel this way pretty much across the board. Every coordinator, the quarterback will get more comfortable in the system in year two. And that's why it's very impressive for a guy like Jalen Hurts or some of these other guys like Baker Mayfield. Every single year, it's a different offensive coordinator. This got to be ridiculous. Justin Herbert, hopefully now they get into a little bit better of a pattern with Greg Roman and they can move forward and continue to have an offense that gets better and better every single year.
Yeah, I mean, and nobody knows what it's like to switch coordinators better than Justin Herbert, right? Who had, 4 in his first 5 seasons? The only time he's ever hit a second year with a coordinator was Joe Lombardi in 2022. So he's had that kind of revolving door there as well. But I think it's such a good point, what you're saying about, them taking those chances and going back to what you said about Bill Belichick. Just do your job. A lot of the times last year when the Chargers couldn't get matched up front, what they would do is say, hey, we have a one-on-one matchup on the outside. If you're just going to blitz everyone and leave us man-to-man coverage, we're just going to let Justin Herbert uncork it down the field. The problem is they were throwing those balls to Quentin Johnston, and it's just not what his game is, right? Or Josh Palmer, and they just didn't seem to be on the same page. You hope now that you're better equipped for situations like that with a Keandre Lambert-Smith who runs a 4-3, with a Trey Harris who's shown the ability to, make contested catches and things of that nature. So hopefully they can do that and better pass pro from your running backs, right? Like if your interior is really struggling, you need someone who can step up and be able to help out in that regard. Feels like the running backs are taking a step in the right direction in that from that standpoint. Omarion Hampton's going to have to be good in that regard. Second year running back Kimani Vidal is going to have to be good in that regard as well. But let's get you out on this. This is one of the things I really appreciate about the football preview from Sharp Football is the amount of time and importance they put on how the scheduling works, right? Like the schedule comes out and you kind of just assume, hey, everything's going to be pretty equal, which couldn't be further from the case, right? I know last year the Chargers had one of the worst rest disadvantages as far as rest they were going to have to face opponents on as opposed to rest they were actually getting. This year, the Chargers from the book ranked 10th or top 10 in rest advantage. They're tied for 7th for the upcoming season. They will have at least 6 days to prepare for all but one game. I love this part of it, right? Because it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And the Chargers are always, as a West Coast team, going to get kind of screwed by the travel part of it. But how big of a deal is it this year that they will have that rest advantage going into many of these games?
Yeah, overall, I rank you guys as 7th best in rest edge rank. So you have a lot of things going for you in that regard, as you mentioned, with the amount of time to prep and the consistency in that. If you look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who are bouncing around playing every single day of the week, playing at night in a lot of their games, I mean, that takes a lot of really good coaching and really good strength and conditioning to get the players ready for all these different game days and all these different time frames. And so if you guys can have a little bit more consistency with some of the edges, that does play a role in terms of your ability to compete and maybe perform and outperform expectations against some of those other opponents. And so I think that it's definitely a step up and step in the right direction. I truly believe that the NFL needs to balance this more regularly within a season, as well as from season to season. Like it's obviously never going to be perfect within a season. There's going to be haves and have-nots, but you can't give like the extremes like they're doing. And then you can't have teams endure those extremes in back-to-back years. You've got to give them a course correction. And so like the San Francisco 49ers, a perfect example. they had minus 20 or more or less net rest for 2 straight years. Finally, this year, they get a course correction and they benefit from it with an easier schedule, especially as it relates to rest. But for 2 years in a row, they were dealing with absurdly high disadvantage from a net rest perspective. So I'm glad that things have corrected themselves a little bit for you guys this year. It's on you now to take advantage of that. And to step up and to execute and to use that rest to your advantage, because some of the smaller differentials don't matter quite as much as it does relate to rest. Later in the season, it's more impactful, as well as some of the 3-day rest edges. Having opponents off of bye weeks doesn't matter quite as much as it once used to, because the CBA doesn't allow those teams to practice as much during their bye week. And as a result, sometimes those teams and players come back a little bit more rusty. So having 3 days net rest edge or 2 days net rest edge sometimes can be a real benefit. And you got one of those games against the Tennessee Titans in week 9. You have it in a little bit of a rest edge week 2 against the Raiders in your first road game. So, you're not going to deal with any rest advantage over the Kansas City Chiefs to start the season. You're not going to deal with any rest advantage over the Kansas City Chiefs in week 15 when you play the rematch in Kansas City. In fact, you're at a negative 1 day rest disadvantage. The one thing that I would caution is you play after your bye. You get to host the Raiders. Obviously, they don't have to travel very far, but you have that bye week edge over them. The next 2 games are the 2 toughest games of your schedule. You play home against the Philadelphia Eagles, on the road against Kansas City Chiefs. You have a rest disadvantage in both of those games because the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, are coming off of a Thursday night game, and the Chiefs are having 1 day of net rest edge over you in that game. So you have a 2-day rest disadvantage over Philly, a 1-day rest disadvantage over the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks late in the season where rest does matter a little bit more. So that's the only real tricky spot that I think you guys have to overcome, but overall much better than it was last year.
Yeah, I mean, to get 6 days, even if the other teams have a couple more days for every game except for one Thursday night football game, is huge. But thank you so much again, Warren, the best analytical mind in football, in my opinion. Can you tell our listeners one more time a special deal for Chargers fans to get what I think is the most comprehensive book of information on the football or on NFL that you're going to get?
I appreciate the opportunity, guys. It's great been talking to you about the Chargers this year. High hopes for the team, and I think you guys are definitely headed in the right direction. And you've got that quarterback and coach, which is what a lot of teams cannot say. So you should feel good about that. You can get the preview over at sharp.football, and you can enter the code Chargers. It'll drop the price from $35 down to just $1 for 586 pages, breaking down the Chargers a little bit more depth than we've done here, but then all the other 31 teams in a lot of depth. I think you guys are going to get a lot of utility out of that book. So thanks again for having me, and really appreciate it. Good luck this season.
Another special thank you to Warren Sharp. Make sure you guys check out that 2025 NFL football preview that he has out right now, but also make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because we have a lot to get to from the weekend, including is Keenan Allen coming back? Denzel Perryman has been arrested. So much to get into, including all of the things that happened at practice and the latest updates there. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow by subscribing to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day wherever you get your social media, on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So much to get to. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow as the only daily Chargers podcast out there, and we'll get you up to date with everything going on. We might even be talking about a Keenan Allen signing. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.